Hi, I am Darla Quinn, and the first time you meet me, I am standing in a kitchen where my paralyzed father-in-law is left alone with nothing but a cold slice of pizza on his birthday. Shocking, right? That was the moment I realized this family wasn't just cruel. They were rewriting reality itself. The conflict? My husband Brice and his mother Marlene were on a beach in Hawaii, laughing, drinking, calling him a burden, while I was the only one left to face the truth. But then came the twist that changed everything. "It's showtime," Eldon whispered, as he rose from his chair, standing on legs everyone thought were gone forever. Have you ever seen someone forgotten, discarded, until they revealed strength no one believed they had? And have you ever been the only one who stayed when everyone else walked away? Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We share new stories every single day. Hit like and let us know what city you're watching from in the comments. I pulled up to the Hanford house at 4:45. The engine was still ticking softly, cooling in the damp October air. The cul-de-sac was so still I could hear the neighbor's wind chime counting the seconds. A lonely sound, stretching the quiet. One hand gripped the grocery store cake on my passenger seat. The other squeezed a card. I had signed it 3 different times, unsure how formal to be with a man who once called me kiddo before life shoved him into a wheelchair. I told myself the family was simply late, maybe traffic from Houston. But deep down, I knew better. Lateness was not their habit. Avoidance was. I let myself in with the key Brice insisted I keep. The foyer smelled faintly of bleach and lemon candles, the kind Marlene lit after scolding me about proper household standards. No birthday banner, no voices, no streamers fluttering from the ceiling the way my mother had always done, even after my dad passed. I set the cake on the hall table, ran fingertips over its plastic lid, listened. Silence, broken only by the fridge kicking on. A year earlier, almost to the day, I had watched Eldon laugh so hard sweet tea came out of his nose. Brice was teasing me about my shifts at the rehab center. Eldon cut him off, saying, "Nursing assistants keep the world turning, while people like Brice just talk." That was the last full laugh before the stroke. Since then, my husband's teasing had not softened. It had only grown snide. His mother's polite smiles had chilled into thin ice. Eldon alone kept asking if I was sleeping, if the night terrors after the miscarriage had eased. He had fought in Janang. Maybe he recognized a different kind of shrapnel I carried. I carried the cake to the kitchen. Halfway there, I stopped short. On the butcher block island sat a single slice of pepperoni pizza. Cold grease congealed along the crust, laid on a crumpled paper towel. Beside it, Eldon rested in his chair, blanket pulled at his ankles, shoulders sagging. The TV was off, the room dim. No candles, no gift wrap, nothing. His eyes met mine. Apology. Shame. A question he was too proud to ask. "Hi, Dad," I whispered. My voice echoed in the kitchen tiles. I placed the cake on the counter, found a plate, a knife, matches, busy hands to distract racing hearts. Before I could light a candle, the FaceTime tone chirped. Brice's name. I answered. The screen exploded with sunset, fiery reds and golds, and the sound of surf. Brice lounged against a tiki bar, a neon drink sweating in his hand. Marlene leaned into the frame, hibiscus tucked behind one ear. "Oh, good," she sang. The nurse showed up. Brice smirked. "Hope you're enjoying babysitting. We figured he would not notice we're gone." Marlene clinked her glass against his. "He will not even know it's his birthday. Just keep him upright, Darla. Try not to break anything." I steadied the phone on the counter. Eldon's jaw quivered. "You left him alone," I said, barely hearing myself. Brice shrugged. "He's got you. Besides, Hawaii was on sale. End of season, you know." Their laughter spilled through the speaker. Something in me cracked. Not loudly. more like fabric tearing under slow force. I pressed end, placed the phone face down. My palms were sweating. I stared at the lonely slice, grease glistening under the overhead bulb. I thought of the casseroles I had prepped during Eldon's therapy weeks, how Brice joked to co-workers that his wife played pretend chef. I laid a fresh napkin over the slice, smoothing the edges as if tucking in a child who had never been wanted. A chair squeaked. I turned. Eldon's blanket slid to the floor. One foot, then the other. Touched tile. Muscles in his calves twitched. He gripped the armrest. Eyes locked on mine, pleading for secrecy, or daring me to speak. I could not tell. Inch by deliberate inch, he levered himself upward, first a crouch, then against every memory I had of his limp body. He stood. Frail, yes, but not broken. My breath caught like paper in a fan. He wobbled, steadied, drew a breath that filled the room with something almost electric. For a full second, my lungs forgot how to work. The man the doctors labeled immobile stood there, cheeks flushed, shoulders squared beneath that old Marine issue flannel. I sputtered. You can really walk now?" He lowered himself back into the chair with deliberate care, as though easing porcelain onto a fragile shelf. "Walk is generous," he muttered, catching his breath. "Shuffle is closer, but it is enough for me." His gaze slid toward the hallway, making sure no one else materialized. No footsteps, no laughter, just the coffee pot clicking off behind us. I knelt so my eyes were level with his. "How long?" "Since early summer," Eldon said. "Started with 10 seconds at a time when they were out shopping. Added 5 seconds every week." His lips curled, half proud, half ashamed. "I kept the tremor on purpose. Makes them always underestimate me." My mind sprinted through the last 4 months. Marlene insisting Eldon needed stronger sedatives. Brice moving yoga equipment into the guest room since Dad never uses it. All that pity, all that scorn. They had milked his condition for sympathy and credit card points. He leaned forward, voice low. "If they knew I could stand, they'd ship me to a nursing home before dawn. It is easier to control money when the old man is tucked away." Betrayal should have tasted bitter, but mostly I felt clarity, an unexpected settling focus. "They used both," I whispered, because it was suddenly obvious. My miscarriage had been followed by Marlene's reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Some women just are not built for real motherhood," she had said. Brice had booked a golf weekend 2 states over instead of staying for the DNC. Only Eldon had texted at 2 a.m. "Proud of you, kiddo. Keep holding on." He reached sideways to the bookcase and pressed a concealed latch. A drawer slid out with a soft scrape, revealing a weathered accordion folder, bulging. On top lay a flash drive. "I recorded everything," he said. "Hidden cam in the garage, baby monitor in my room. Doctors, lawyers, their phone calls. Even last night. Brice bragging he'd change your IRA beneficiary while sipping Mai Tais." I glanced at the hall again. "Why show me?" "Because you still show up, Darla," he said simply. "And because kindness without backbone gets trampled. I have asked too much silence of you already." The folder was heavier than it looked. Bank statements. Medical charts marked discontinued meds in red. Notarized letters revoking power of attorney from Marlene months ago. "They never noticed," he murmured. "Too busy planning cruises." My pulse thudded. Years of swallowing insults, of telling myself keep the peace. It collapsed in a blink. I pressed a palm over his liver-spotted hand. "Then let us give them a birthday gift they will never forget," I whispered. He managed a rusty chuckle. "That's my girl, always tougher than they knew." The grandfather clock chimed 7 from the dining room. I helped him settle. Double-checked that the baby monitor light blinked red, still recording, and locked the drawer. On the counter, my phone buzzed. 3 texts from Brice. "Where did you put Dad's meds? Cake good? Send a pic of the old man for the gram, babe." I powered it off. Outside, dusk had given way to a syrupy darkness. Street lamps flickered on as I eased into my aging Corolla. The passenger seat smelled of frosting and regret. I did not turn the radio on. I let the engine hum steadily, while my thoughts rearranged themselves in long, uneven patterns. No tears tonight, just the slow realization that the version of me who always apologized for existing had stayed behind in that kitchen. Halfway home, a notification flashed on the dash. Voicemail from Brice, voice tight with suspicion. I ignored it, letting the silence grow longer. The subdivision entrance appeared familiar, yet oddly brighter, as if the night itself approved of my mutiny. At the driveway I killed the engine, lingering in the hush. House windows glowed warm, but I stayed put. Listening to cicadas saw the air, feeling the steering wheel beneath my fingertips. Steady, sure. The woman who had driven away from hospitals alone was still there, but she was not alone anymore. I stepped out, gravel crunching under flats, and looked up at the moon. Not just a witness. I told the quiet street, part of the storm, part of the fight. Morning crept in while the phrase, part of the storm, still echoed like a drumbeat in my chest. I had slept maybe 2 hours, but adrenaline made coffee unnecessary. By 6, I was on the highway, pink dawn reflecting off the windshield. I did not text Brice a thing. Let him guess why his automatic location pings showed my phone back at his father's place. Steering onto the familiar driveway, I felt the first spark of ownership, as if the cracked concrete already knew it would soon answer to someone else. Eldon waited in the doorway, robe belted, posture straighter than any physical therapist would believe. He tipped his chin toward the garage. "We will need a step stool. Right now." That was all. No good morning, no small talk, just mission tempo. The kind of clipped efficiency he had probably used in the jungle half a century ago. Cobwebs hung from the rafters when I clicked on the fluorescent strips. The smell of old paint. 2-cycle fuel. Forgotten Christmas wreaths wrapped around us. Brice never let me linger here. Said this was guy space. Funny how masculinity required a padlock. Eldon guided me to the far wall, tapped a drywall seam I had never noticed. "False ceiling panel," he whispered. "Push up and slide carefully." Balanced on the stool, I shoved. Flecks of plaster rained down. A metal lock box thunked onto my hands. Inside, 3 palm-sized cameras and a battered external hard drive jostled against each other. "They forgot one important thing," Eldon murmured. "I was trained to document enemy movement." We carried the loot to the basement office. An unfinished room Marlene always called the dungeon. Dust coated every surface. Because no one bothered to clean a space only Eldon used. I set the drive on the desk, booted the dusty tower PC. The monitor blinked alive. A dated operating system, but enough to load the files. Footage filled the screen, time-stamped clips, each labeled by hand. Eldon tapped June 12th. Kitchen. Marlene's voice crackled through the tiny speakers. "If he drops dead before July, I swear I will take a cruise in his honor, really celebrate it." My stomach flipped, yet I clicked the next file anyway. Brice leaned over the wheelchair, whispering so sweetly the microphone barely caught it. "Stay alive till the refinance clears, old man. After that, no promises, you hear me." Clip after clip rolled. Talk of selling heirloom rifles, draining retirement funds, forging signatures. Then one from just 2 nights earlier in the garage. Brice tipping back beer, bragging to Marlene about erasing me from Dad's debit card. "She is useful, picks up prescriptions, keeps the lights on, but once we move him to Meadowbrook, we ghost her. Simple. Real simple." He toasted to the plan. She clinked. I froze. Hands fisted so hard my nails dug crescents into my palms. Cost sharing. Groceries. Brice's so-called business conferences. I had paid for half of it on the same card he had just cancelled. Eldon's jaw tightened. "They strip us piece by piece," he said, voice low. "First dignity, then money, and finally, memory itself." I inhaled, steadying myself. We had proof. But would it matter without the rest? He reached for the desk drawer, produced a ring of tarnished keys. There is more buried upstairs. Files I hid back when my handwriting still looked steady. Beneficiaries, asset transfers, passwords, all of it. What is up there might change absolutely everything. Then let it, I answered. I pocketed the keys, headed for the attic stairs. Hardwood creaked under each step. Insulation dust floated like snow in the narrow beam of my flashlight. At the back, a dented filing cabinet crouched behind stacked suitcases. The middle drawer resisted, metal groaning, but finally slid open. Inside lay folders, the color of cigarette smoke. The first tab read, Amendment Beneficiary Change. I checked my phone. 2 days until their return flight. Plenty of time, if I worked faster than panic. Knees trembling, I flipped the folder open. Eldon's signature sat beside a witness seal, dated last March. The new beneficiary line glowed in faded ink. Marlene E. and Brice. A shiver, part vindication, part grief, ran the length of my spine. Not once had Brice mentioned this change. Of course not. He probably planned to shred it once Eldon accidentally misplaced the document. A floorboard creaked downstairs. Eldon called up. "You all right up there, Darla?" "Better than all right," I answered, hugging the folder tight to my chest. I think we just found the true backbone of our case. Yet something in me knew. This was merely the first layer. Cabinets rarely guard only one secret. The clock on the wall read 11. Sunlight filtered through attic vents. Dust motes, swirling like unsettled ghosts. 2 days. I slid deeper into the cabinet, searching for anything that could dismantle their story once and for all. I thought I was helping him dig up the past. But what we uncovered was far from over. The attic smelled like cardboard and cedar dust. I sat cross-legged on the creaky floorboards, the light from a narrow skylight slanting across the folder I had just pulled out. Its edges were frayed, but the label was clear. Amendment Beneficiary Change. My hands were not shaking, but something in me was like a calm before the kind of storm that does not come with thunder, only truth. I unfastened the rusted clasp, expecting, I do not know, a draft, a note of intention. But this was a fully executed document, signed, notarized, stamped. Then my breath caught. My name, Darla Quinn. Not Marlene. Not even Brice. Me. Sole caretaker. An executor of the estate. There was no way this was a mistake. It had Eldon's full legal name, his signature, and a date from just over 6 months ago. I looked over the notary seal. It was real. I had done enough mortgage paperwork to recognize a valid signature. No trickery here. As I lifted the last page, a single sheet of lined paper fell into my lap. It was yellowed, folded into fourths, ink slightly smudged. If you are reading this, it means I still trust you. Not because you are perfect, but because you never treated me like I was less than human. If anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I fall silent, this document is your light. Show it to them. Let them choke hard on the truth. It was not signed, but it did not need to be. I pressed the note to my chest for a moment, then slipped both the legal pages and the handwritten one back into the folder. The house creaked below. Maybe just settling. Maybe not. Either way, I moved carefully down the attic ladder, stepping softly on each rung, folder in hand, like it held the weight of justice. Eldon was in the kitchen, his chair positioned by the open window, the breeze ruffling the edge of the newspaper on his lap. His eyes flicked to me, then to the folder. I did not say a single word. I just handed it to him. He opened it, scanned the front page, then closed his eyes with a long, weary exhale. I thought they might have burned it completely, he said quietly, almost to himself. They found the copy I kept locked in the bedroom safe. But not this one, not yet. I crouched beside him. They tried to make you change it, didn't they? His laugh carried no humor, just jagged memory. They threatened to let me rot, said they would take away the nurse, stop bringing food. Brice yelled that I was playing dictator. Marlene called me a burden, but I was still in my right mind. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew who would show up, even when they did not. He turned to me, eyes sharp again, still alive underneath the fatigue. That is why you are on that paper, Darla. That is why you are the one. I did not know what to say. I thought of all the weekends Brice needed time to decompress while I cleaned his father's sheets, of Marlene's casual cruelty, brushing crumbs off her dress while calling Eldon a relic with good insurance. And now this. I stood, reached for a glass of water. The kitchen clock said 2:17 p.m. I had barely noticed time passing. The world had narrowed to paper and memory came fast now. 2 years ago, at one of Marlene's wine nights, I had passed through the hallway as she was laughing to someone on speakerphone. "He is not dead yet," she snorted. "Must have done a deal with the devil or something." Back then I thought it was tasteless sarcasm, her brand, but now I saw it clearer. That was not a joke, it was disappointment. She had been waiting on an inheritance that refused to arrive. Behind me, Eldon wheeled over to the wall cabinet. He pressed the edge of a panel. It clicked open. Another folder slid out, thinner this time. Inside was a single page. "If I die," he said softly, "you have first right to buy this house for $1. It is already notarized, and they do not know this exists at all." I blinked. "Why me, Eldon? Why not them?" His answer was quiet, but firm. "Because you made this house feel alive again, Darla, and they have mocked you for far, far too long." I stared at the deed, the clause, the clean, typewritten lines that spelled out a decision made in absolute secret. "I never wanted any of this," I said aloud, though I was not sure who I was saying it to. "Wanting it is not the point," Eldon replied. "Understanding why they hate you is the point." I looked up slowly, the folder clutched in my hands, his words sinking deep like a slow, steady weight. "Now you understand why they hate you," he whispered, and the words kept pulsing in my ears long after we left the attic. I sat at the kitchen table, late afternoon sun drifting across the laminate like a slow tide. The amended will and the $1 house agreement lay in front of me, their edges weighted by a chipped mug. My fingertips still tingled, but the tremor was not fear anymore. It was purpose. "I will not let them maneuver you again," I said, steadying my voice. "We do this strictly by the book. No shortcuts. Nothing they can twist against us." Eldon nodded as if he had already run that calculus long ago. "Then fetch the brown notebook in my office. Bottom drawer, left-hand side." The office smelled of typewriter oil and old victories. Under a stack of dog-eared manuals sat a leather journal embossed with faded initials. Inside the front cover, one number was written twice, once in ink, once in pencil, as if to remind whoever held it that the digits mattered more than the paper itself. Back in the kitchen I dialed. A firm baritone answered on the first ring. "Mr. Lowell Trask. This is Darla Quinn and Eldon Vance," Eldon said. "You might be expecting my call." A brief pause, then warmth. "Ah, the daughter-in-law who still shows up. Put my old friend on, would you?" Eldon took the receiver, exchanged pleasantries in a code of shared battles I could not fully translate, references to VA hearings, a fishing trip that doubled as reconnaissance. Then he handed the phone back. "Darla," Mr. Lowell Trask said, "I filed that will the very week Eldon signed it. County records are immutable. They can howl, but they cannot erase ink that is already dry. More important, I hold the original trust from 2009. If a physician clears Eldon to manage his affairs again, full authority reverts to him, and by extension to you, as his designated agent. I will drive up tomorrow with certified copies." Relief flooded me. hot and unexpected. "Thank you so much, sir," I breathed. "I am just the mechanic," he replied. "You and Eldon are the engine." The line clicked off. Eldon rolled to the pantry cabinet, reached behind canned peaches, and produced a miniature safe. The key he had pressed into my palm earlier fit perfectly inside. Neatly bound packets, life insurance payouts, brokerage statements, a revoked power of attorney, signed 3 months after his so-called stroke, nestled between ledgers. Sat atop them was a photograph. Our wedding day. Eldon in his dress blues, Brice stiff beside him. Marlene turned 3/4 from the camera so her forced smile would not crack. Eldon tapped the image. "They framed a copy for themselves, cropped you out. I kept the real one." Something inside me, the last filament of blind loyalty, finally snapped. "They have been rewriting the story for years," I said slowly. "Time we hand the audience the director's cut version." Dusk settled across the house, drawing long shadows over paperwork that now felt less like evidence and more like ammunition. I brewed coffee, though neither of us needed caffeine. We spent an hour sorting documents into piles, assets, medical records, forged requests. Eldon's precise military penmanship labeled each folder. Have you ever discovered a hidden truth or betrayal in your own family? The kind that changes how you see everything forever? Share your feelings below, drop your story, or simply comment number 1 if you understand. 8:30 rolled in on the grandfather clock's measured chime. I was sliding the final stack into a banker's box when the landline rang. An antique rotary that seldom buzzed unless telemarketers found it. Eldon glanced at the caller ID, jaw tightening. "Brice," he murmured. "Answer on speaker." I hesitated only a heartbeat before pressing the button. The line opened with wind noise and what sounded like bar music. Brice's voice came through too loud. Maybe too many cocktails. "Dad, Darla, you two having a cozy little evening?" A brittle laugh. "Listen, I checked the account this afternoon. My debit card is not working. Care to explain that one?" Eldon's gaze drilled into me. This was it. The confrontation neither of us could postpone. "Brice is on the line," Eldon said again, calm as a judge. "Put it on speaker." I reached for the speaker button without flinching. Eldon did not move either. His eyes locked on the phone like it might combust. "Hey there, birthday boy." Brice's voice slid through the line, syrupy, smug. "How's the party? You and the maid cut the cake yet?" In the background, Marlene cackled like it was the best punchline she had heard all week. "Maybe she lit a candle on a pizza slice," she added, barely able to breathe from laughing. I did not say a word. I wanted them to keep going. I wanted them to feel safe, stupid, and smug, just long enough to hang themselves with their own words. Then Eldon leaned forward in his chair and spoke, steady, sharp, far too lucid for their comfort. "Hello, son." The line went quiet. "Dad?" Brice's voice dropped half an octave. "You are, standing." Eldon's tone did not shift an inch. "That is not your concern. But your inheritance, that might be." There was a rustling on the other end, as if someone had bumped the phone or dropped something. Marlene jumped in, voice shrill. "This is manipulation. Darla's manipulating you. She is brainwashing you, Eldon." I stepped in smoothly, opening the folder that had been sitting on the table beside me. "Actually," I said carefully, "I am executing the responsibilities given to me under a legally binding, durable power of attorney signed by Eldon Vance and notarized 6 months ago. The attorney of record is Mr. Lowell Trask." Silence again. Then Brice. "What are you talking about, Darla? You are not even family, not really." I cut him off flatly. "According to Eldon's will, which your mother conveniently never told you about, I am, in fact, the only one listed as successor trustee. That is the truth." Eldon nodded toward me, a silent endorsement. His eyes were calm but cold, the kind of cold you only earn after a lifetime of betrayal. Marlene huffed audibly, frustrated. This is absurd. We already changed the locks on the vacation house in Big Bear. We have been cleaning out all that antique junk. Making space, you know? That place needed an upgrade anyway. I felt my hands tighten hard on the arms of my chair. That house was in the irrevocable trust. Their arrogance had just confessed to theft on a recorded line. You sold items from a property held in trust, I said, my voice still level but now with a heat beneath it. Marlene, I hope you realize that is not just rude, it is outright criminal. You cannot prove anything, she spat. Eldon did not blink. Everything you have touched can be traced. Every item. Every deposit. You think you are untouchable because you laughed while I was stuck in a wheelchair, because you threw a party in Hawaii on my birthday. Brice growled. This is insane. You cannot come after us with what? Some lawyer's letter. You will find out tomorrow morning, I said, my tone sharp. When the cease and desist is served to both of you, Mr. Lowell Trask is already drafting it tonight. You are bluffing, Marlene barked. No, I replied, my voice steady like a glass pane that was about to crack. You just got far too comfortable stealing from someone you thought was weak and broken. Brice's voice dropped again, this time shaky, almost frightened. What do you want then, Darla? Eldon leaned back in his chair. To see what happens, son, when the forgotten finally become the powerful. Marlene was losing it now. You are a selfish, bitter old man who is letting some gold digger poison you completely. I raised an eyebrow, ignoring the insult. Your problem, I said calmly, is that you assumed kindness was weakness, but some of us know exactly how to fight quietly and win. You are not getting away with this, Brice shouted. We will get our own lawyer. Eldon chuckled, low and dry. Good, let them read the trust, then let them explain to you just how badly you have messed up. The line started to distort from raised voices. I could hear Marlene yelling something about calling their cousin in real estate law, as if that could undo everything they had already admitted. I reached forward and calmly ended the call. The silence that followed rang louder than any shouting had before. I looked down at the phone, fingers still resting on the buttons, heart pounding hard, but my face cool and steady. Then I turned to Eldon. You have made a very big mistake, I said quietly into the room. See you both in court, every single one of you. The phone call ended with a hollow click, but the words still hung in the air, sharp, echoing like glass breaking. I did not need to look at Eldon to feel his resolve. He did not speak. He simply rose, slower this time, with more weight on his cane, and motioned for me to follow. No words. Just that look again. Determined, focused. We moved through the silent house, past the family portrait still hanging crooked on the hallway wall. Dust had begun to claim the corners, as though even the house itself had started grieving. Eldon stopped at the foot of a narrow staircase tucked behind the pantry. He glanced at me. They never came up here, he said. Too busy making plans to bury me early. The attic groaned as we stepped in. The smell was old wood, mildew, and time itself. Eldon reached for the light chain. The bulb flickered on, casting long shadows over forgotten boxes and canvas-covered furniture. The floor creaked with every step, and something about that sound made my pulse quicken. They thought the dust would keep their secrets safe, Eldon muttered. But I always knew the truth prefers silence. We moved box by box. Old tax records, yellowed holiday cards, a box labeled Brice's College, surprisingly light. But then, tucked beneath a stack of worn photo albums, was a cracked leather binder. It looked unremarkable, until I opened it. Inside were documents so brittle they seemed to whisper as I turned the pages. But what they revealed shouted. The original trust, irrevocable, untouched. Eldon's signature, notarized years ago. Handwritten notes detailing each account moved, each deed reassigned. And then, stapled in the back, pages of forged signatures. Marlene's handwriting unmistakably clumsy where it tried to imitate her husband's hand. I looked up. Eldon's mouth tightened, but he did not seem surprised. "They thought I was losing it," he said, his voice flat. "So I let them think exactly that. The more I forgot, the more careless they became." He knelt beside a different box and pulled out a faded composition notebook. Pages and pages of what looked like journal entries, but were really a ledger. Every sale, every withdrawal, every time Marlene or Brice dipped their hands into his life like it was theirs to take. "They laughed when I started putting notes on sticky pads," Eldon added. "Said I was going senile, but every single note I left out was a decoy. The real records lived up here, with the mold and the mice." We spent the next hour cataloging what we found, photographing everything with my phone. I emailed backup copies to myself, to Eldon's cloud folder, and to Mr. Cyrus Denton, the family lawyer. Eldon nodded in approval as I hit send. By late afternoon, we were sitting across from Mr. Cyrus Denton in his small office just outside town. The man had been in the family's legal circle for decades, but as he flipped through the binder, his expression shifted, from skepticism to cold rage. "This was not just mishandling," he said, tapping the forged pages. "This is felony fraud, and combined with what Eldon has written here, elder abuse, financial coercion, maybe even conspiracy to defraud the trust itself." He glanced at me, then at Eldon, and said firmly, "And the power of attorney you reactivated last spring, that means, Darla, you have full legal authority to act completely on his behalf now." I did not say anything, just nodded slowly. But something inside me settled, heavy, unshakable. This was no longer just a fight, no longer a family squabble. It was justice itself taking shape. We began drafting the legal orders. Mr. Cyrus Denton dictated while I typed, line by careful line, freezing any asset transfer requests, halting suspicious sales, placing liens on accounts. Eldon reviewed each document as though he were reviewing battle maps from a war long ago, eyes sharp, despite fatigue. And when we reached the list of antiques sold from the vacation property, I added a formal reversal notice to every single entry. "Those items were never theirs to sell," I said out loud, more to myself than anyone else. "And now, legally, that is completely clear." It was fully dark when we got back to the house. Eldon moved slower now, the long day having taken its toll, but his grip on his cane was still iron firm. He led me into his study, opened a drawer that stuck halfway, then reached behind it. Something clicked. Out came a manila folder, different from the rest, cleaner, newer. He held it out to me but did not open it. "This," he said softly, voice carrying both weight and weariness, "is what they will never expect to see." I stared at him. "What is it exactly, Eldon?" He just smiled, tired, but undeniably triumphant. "And you, Darla, you are the one who will deliver it." I walked into the courtroom with Eldon's folder pressed tightly to my chest, the seal still unbroken. My heels echoed louder than I expected against the marble floor, each step sounding like a drumbeat. Brice and Marlene were already seated at the long table up front, smirking like they were watching a second-rate sitcom. Marlene tossed her hair and muttered something to their lawyer, who gave me a dismissive glance, but then his eyes caught the folder. His whole body stiffened. The smirk melted. And suddenly the room was swallowed by quiet. I handed the folder directly to the judge's clerk. He received it with a solemn nod, and immediately brought it to the bench. The judge, a woman with eyes sharp enough to peel wallpaper, leaned forward as the seal cracked. A low hush swept the gallery. "Proceeding to supplemental document review," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "Introduced by party Darla Quinn under advisement of the estate's primary testator, Mr. Eldon Vance." I took my seat. Brice shot me a glare that could have burned through paper. Inside the envelope, page after page bore Eldon's unmistakable scrawl. But the document that broke the room's breath came 2 pages in. An amended clause from 6 years ago, notarized, time-stamped, legally airtight. The judge read aloud, "All named heirs shall forfeit their claim to any estate distributions, financial or material, if they fail to demonstrate continued moral fitness, presence at familial milestones, including but not limited to medical emergencies, birthdays, and end-of-life decisions. Malicious neglect and absence shall constitute grounds for permanent disinheritance." The silence snapped. Gasps rippled. A woman in the second row slapped a hand over her mouth. A court reporter let out a whispered, "Oh, wow." Even a cameraman from the local news station straightened in his seat, like he had just realized this was not some probate routine. It was history being written. Marlene's voice sliced through the moment. "This is ridiculous. That is coercion. He was old. He did not even know what he was doing." The judge barely blinked. "The document predates your argument," she said firmly, "and I have here a video deposition from 3 days ago submitted directly from the care facility." The screen lit up at the front of the courtroom. There was Eldon, upright, eyes clear. "I know exactly what I am doing." He said in the video, "They left me completely alone on my birthday. They called me names, laughed while I sat with nothing but a single slice of cold pizza, with no one to blow out even one candle. That is not love. That is cruelty. Cruelty hiding behind the mask of family." The clip ended. The courtroom stayed utterly silent. My eyes drifted to Eldon in the gallery. His hand rested firmly on the arm of his wheelchair. He met my gaze and gave me the smallest nod. We were not just making a point anymore. We were setting a boundary that should have been drawn long ago. The judge looked down at Marlene. "Do you have anything further at all to add before I proceed?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. I knew why. Because next came the time-stamped photos. I reached into my file and passed them up. There they were. Brice and Marlene on a beach chair in Maui, holding up mimosas, on the exact date and time Eldon had been sitting alone, forgotten, waiting for someone, anyone, to say happy birthday. The judge reviewed them without a single word. Then she turned her attention to the flash drive included in the envelope, additional supporting video from the defendant. The video played. Eldon, years younger, seated beside his longtime caregiver, who would later resign under Marlene's pressure. "This clause," he said, gesturing slowly to the paper, "protects the legacy not for money, but for love and dignity. I cannot let them wear the Hanford name like a coat they only pull out for holidays." The court clerk stopped the video on the frame where Eldon stared directly into the camera. My throat tightened. That was the moment I remembered why I had stayed, why I had helped him. He had known long before I did. Brice could not hold it in anymore. He bolted upright and pointed across the room. "You did this!" he roared at me. "You manipulated him. You wormed your way in like some scheming, gold-digging nurse." "Brice," the judge warned. But he was past the point of no return. "You planned this whole thing. You made him sign it. You are not family. You never were." I did not move. I did not even flinch. Instead, I held up one more piece of evidence, a printed screenshot of Brice's flight itinerary, and a social post of him and Marlene tagging a resort with the slogan, "No cripples allowed." A murmur of disgust rippled through the courtroom. The judge glanced back down at the documents, and then looked straight at me. "Under the conditions of this amended clause," she said, her voice steady but firm, "all inheritance rights are hereby voided for Ms. Marlene Croy and Mr. Brice Harlan effective immediately." Marlene let out a shocked sob. Brice just stood there, pale as stone. The judge continued. "The entirety of the Hanford estate, liquid, fixed, and intellectual, shall be transferred to the sole designated trustee outlined in the clause, in accordance with Mr. Eldon Vance's intent." A pause. She turned toward me. "And do you accept what has been entrusted to you?" I looked at Eldon. He did not speak. He did not have to. My voice found its way out, stronger than I remembered it. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I do. I accept, because this is not about wealth. It is about restoring what should never have been taken away." The judge's gavel came down. crisp and definitive. Control of every account, every property, and every share slid from Brice and Marlene's fingers into mine. Their attorney packed papers with shaking hands. Marlene's mascara streaked down her cheeks while she sobbed into a silk scarf. Brice stormed out first, shoulders rigid, muttering angrily about appeals, but the echo of the ruling followed him like a relentless drumbeat. He could not outrun them. Court officers ushered reporters aside so Eldon could exit. He refused the wheelchair. He would not let anyone roll him out like a victim. Instead, he gripped his cane, nodded politely to every stunned onlooker, and walked the length of the corridor under his own deliberate power. When we reached the sunlight outside, he exhaled, as though the last 3 years had finally lifted from his chest in one long, steady breath. Back in Pasadena, late afternoon light poured through freshly washed windows. The cold pizza pan was gone, replaced by the smell of bubbling lasagna drifting warmly through the air. I set 2 plates on the table, real china, not paper this time, and poured sweet tea into heavy glasses Eldon had kept from his Navy days. He settled into the dining chair at the head of the table. "First real hot meal I have had in my own house in months," he said, eyes glinting with quiet triumph. "And no one calling it a waste of calories anymore." We ate in unhurried silence, letting the ordinary act of dinner feel revolutionary, almost sacred. When the dishes were rinsed and stacked, Eldon wheeled a small cedar chest from the hall. Inside lay the photo album Marlene had once tried to trash, now dusted, restored, and whole. He opened to a page of Polaroids, him and my late husband smiling beside a battered fishing boat, me holding up a tiny base like it was gold. "I kept this one," he said, tracing the faded edge tenderly, "because I looked genuinely happy. And so did you, Darla." I ran a thumb over the picture. That trip had taken place 2 summers before the stroke. Before grief hardened Brice's humor into something mean. Before Marlene's ambitions turned ruthless and sharp. I realized how long it had been since I had seen that version of myself. Laughing. Alive. Without a clock, ticking relentlessly over my head. Eldon closed the album and slid it toward me. "This legacy is not cash, Darla," he said quietly. "It is choosing who gets a seat at the table. Money only pays for the chairs." We moved to the study, where new documents awaited signatures. Paperwork launching the Hanford Foundation for Abandoned Caregivers. Mr. Lowell Trask had drafted bylaws, and I added a mission statement in plain language. Grants for respite care, legal aid, hands-on training. Eldon initialed every page with hands that barely shook, his pen strokes deliberate. Night settled outside. Porch lights clicked on up and down the street. Families finishing dinner in houses filled with voices. I stood by the window watching shadows stretch across the lawn. Brice had once promised to sod it but never did. Maybe next spring, I thought, I would plant lavender there instead. Something rooted, something fragrant. Eldon spoke behind me. "Blood does not prove love, Darla. Presence does." "It does," I nodded softly. "Sometimes the family that matters most is the one that actually stays when things go quiet." We recorded a short video for the Foundation's site. Eldon explaining the clause in his own words, me inviting viewers to share their own stories. When I pressed stop, he asked gently, "Are you ready for people to know everything?" "Truth is lighter than lies," I answered, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Before bed, I sat one last time at the dining table. An empty chair faced me across the wood. A reminder that someone, somewhere, is always arriving late to understanding. That seat will stay open in case they ever decide to change. I thought of the years of silence, of how many people are forgotten until the moment they prove they are unforgettable. And I thought of what it means to be the one who stays when everyone else has walked away. This story is not just ours. It belongs to anyone who has ever felt invisible, overlooked, or dismissed, yet chose to stand tall anyway. I would love to hear from you. Share your own experiences, your truths, your battles, and your victories in the comments below. Your words may remind someone else that they are not alone. If you found meaning in this story, Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell if you want to hear more stories like this. At the end, I leave you with just a few words to drop in the comments. Simple, clear, and powerful. Live free, begin again. I look forward to meeting you again in the next video, where another story waits to unfold. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon.